with Charley Wallace. And we've got a number of you coming in now, so I'll just let you keep joining in and see how many we get up to. Really good attendance today, really pleased. Format of the webinar, I'm sure many of you on today have already joined one of our webinars. We'll just do a few words of introduction and then hand over to Charley, who's going to take us through a few slides, presentations and thoughts. And then we'll be making plenty of time for question and answer. If you do have a question, please drop them in the Q&A box, which you should be able to see in front of you. We can pick them up from there and answer them. If we need to bring any of you in to add a bit more clarity or information, we can do that as well. So we know who you are and we can see we can do that. So that's good. Do let your questions come though, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can in the time that we've got up till 1 o'clock. If there are burning questions afterwards that you haven't got, then of course we can try and facilitate a follow up on that as well. I hopefully will be able to share the slides afterwards as well, so you've got those, and we are recording it. So if you need to drop off, if your doorbell goes or you have to go on to another event or something, we'll post the link to that recording up on our website a little bit later on today. And it should be on there usually for about a month if you want to duck back in and find some more information later on. Okay, I think that's most of you joined in now. 1 or 2 latecomers just joining, but I think most people are online. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're really pleased today to welcome Charley Wallace to speak to you on this webinar. I've just got Charley's full job title, so I'm going to read it to you. She is the Freight National Passenger Operator and Customer Experience Director at Network Rail. I'm sure that's leaving most of you would do, seeing as I think as far as we're concerned, that pretty much summarises what we think Network Rail ought to be doing. But no doubt Charley can tell us a little bit more about her role. I'm sure many of you will also have seen last week some changes in organisational structure at Network Rail, and so it feels particularly timely today to have Charley here with us talking about her role, but also what Network Rail's plans for freight are in the coming months and the year ahead. So without further ado, Charley, over to you.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me along, Maggie. As you say, it's timely, and I think it's appropriate that we kind of start the first Freight webinar to kind of give an update on behalf of Network Rail. So apologies in advance that I'm going to have to put my video off, because as I've explained, my Wi-Fi is a bit of a nightmare at the moment, so I can't actually see my slides. Maggie, if you want to kind of put up the first one, that would be great.
There we go.
Fantastic. So, hi everyone. I hope you're well and being up in this very snowy weather that we're having at the moment. I know it's been one of those kind of starts to the year where we had a bit of dreariness at the start, but I think the snow's actually perked many people up. I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak to you today and to introduce myself and for Network Rail to discuss our priorities for Freight 2021, a year that I believe will be chock-a-block with opportunities and challenges in equal measure, such as decarbonisation, rail reform and many more. I hope that today can be the catalyst for us coming together to take on these challenges and exploit any opportunities and absolutely put freight first. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to reflect on the monumental year, certainly in freight context, that 2020 was, and how we can collectively build on a legacy of what has been an incredible response by the freight industry to such a severe and devastating disruption. But we continue to deliver the vital service for our country. So a little bit about me. I'd like to start by saying I've always been very passionate about customer service, and nowhere in that scale of the challenge is greater than Network Rail, which is what attracted me to this role. Could you move the slide on for me, Maggie? I joined Network Rail last March, and I think at that time it's now been imbued with ominous connotations about COVID, and it's burned that memory into our brain, but we call it BC, before COVID, and what comes after that, well, that's for the world to navigate now. So it wasn't my fault we went into lockdown, but it was literally 2 weeks after I started. So I virtually met some of the team, and then we went into the crazy lockdown that was 2020. But before that baptism of fire at Network Rail, I managed and led teams in the transport industry, mainly in rail and aviation, and I've done so for 20 plus years. I'm not going to say exact number, I'm trying to keep my age a secret here, of course. These roles were mainly based operationally on customer, business transformation and people management. I've also been a non-executive director and was chair of Edinburgh Trams for 5 years, CEO of West Lothian Chamber of Commerce, and I've also been an ambassador for Visit Scotland in the past. So again, remiss to say happy Burns Day to everybody today. I also believe it's the Welsh Valentine's Day, which I didn't realise either. So if there's any Welsh people on, happy Valentine's Day to you today. Coming over to Network Rail was an easy move for me because I'd heard about the change in culture with Chief Executive Andrew Haynes joining, and I instantly knew I wanted to be involved. I've worked with Andrew previously, and I'd also had interaction with him at the Civil Aviation Authority, and I thought if anybody is going to change the culture of Network Rail, it was certainly going to be him. Previously, we've just been seen as an infrastructure company. We kind of lost sight of what we actually do. And this really interested me, having been on the opposite side of the fence, working with train operating companies mainly. I was keen to be part of it. And when I was approached about this new national passenger and operations and customer experience team, I jumped at the chance. And a few months ago, perhaps as the sequel to the baptism of fire, I was asked to head up the freight team as well. Where I hope I can bring my passion and experience of what I believe to be excellent customer service to the table and make a sea change in our offer and our approach to the way things are done and how we support you. Certainly putting customers at the heart of everything I do has been our mantra for the last year, and certainly I know that the putting passengers first message has gone across quite well to the train operating companies as well. It's been an exciting journey so far as we've been going through this change in culture. As I said, we've had our monumental Putting Passengers First programme, which is all about our customers. And while I'm speaking about that, let's address the lexical elephant in the room. In a memorable catchphrase sense, freight was crucially missed from that mantra. And I know that's been a thorny issue with many of you. And us saying, well, it's clearly implied or it goes without saying is just not good enough. We did try to address this a lot at the PPF comms, and now we're out including freight, but the damage, I think, had already been done at that point and the omission was clear. Could you move on to the third slide, please, Maggie? That said, I do think that we have now come out the other side with a whole new focus on customers, and that's driven by a greater understanding about who our customers actually are and what their needs are. And in this, we're starting to make some strides, but the key is making sure everyone in Network Rail understands our role and our promise to our customers and is empowered to act on it, which is a lot easier to say than do. We must be willing to go beyond that empty promise, and the challenge is I'm thrilled to be part of it. As I said, customer service is in my blood, it's in my passion, and absolutely at the heart of everything I do. So now, given the changes we've seen at Network Rail and at the freight team, we're now going to see more of me and my relentless drive for getting customer service right and actually listening to what our customers want. Maggie, can you move to slide 4, please? For me, this means continuing to give freight a voice. I think we all know how important this is and will continue to be critical for all our industry to have an amplified voice within an evolved Network Rail and any future plans that come from any reform agenda. As an example of the constant state of flux we have found ourselves in and the quest to organise ourselves better, you might have heard last week that the freight team under my leadership will be moving into the system operator function. This is a great move, in my opinion, as it brings us closer to the strategic capacity planning side of the business, which is crucial to achieving the key elements that will help your business to flourish. Longer, heavier, faster trains, and more often. It also puts us right in the centre of reform and decarbonisation with that agenda at the forefront of what we're doing. We're going to see some of the most dominant issues on the agenda for the foreseeable future, and freight will also have a voice for the first time at our internal Customer and Communities Committee, to which I can add it's only about time. Freight in 2020, or how not to waste a crisis. I'll move on to the next slide, please, Maggie. I'm also here today to say thank you. We'd like to say we're in the business of getting people and goods where they need to be on time and safely, but goods are easy to take for granted. People just think somehow they magically turn up, which is why freight, many of you here today, are the unsung heroes of this pandemic. Up and down the country, you made sure the people who get goods, many of them essential, where they need to be, did exactly that, and we kept the calm and carry on spirit to boot. It is without hubris that I say Freight is truly delivering for this country in a time of need. With a bit of time and space because of the reduced passenger timetable, we were able to test our long-held desire to run longer trains. And through collaboration, a major factor in our success, and very careful planning, we were able to increase about a dozen trains a day, some up to around 775 metres in length, which carried around 12 to 14 extra containers. The benefits of which are myriad: environmental increased efficiency, reduced costs, to name a few. Because of the crisis, aspirations have become reachable realities. We just need to make sure that we put freight first, maximise the benefits it brings without needing any other crisis to show us how to do it. Next slide, please. Can you move to the next slide, Maggie, please?
Yeah, I have. Has it not come up?
No, it's not come up. I'll just keep talking. It might just take a bit to come up. Of course, work this year hasn't been focused on the crisis, and many of you have been heavily engaged with the work in both the reform and decarbonisation areas. Collectively, we've not only managed to successfully deliver today, but we've managed to continue to plan for tomorrow. So many of you have been involved in the major forward-looking work streams this year, such as traction decarbonisation network strategy, whole industry strategic plan, and I know that we've got Richard Moody on the call to answer any more difficult freight questions that may come up later on and help me out, and the various future-looking investments such as securing additional Class 90 locomotives for freight and the commencement of new high-speed logistics flows, to name check a few. This work needs to continue during this year and beyond, and together we need to continue to develop for our customers both today and in the future. Move on to the next slide, please, Maggie. So Freight in 2021, I hope that neatly segues into the year ahead and what it holds for us. Longer trains and heavier trains are but one aspiration we can make happen. And I know longer trains means we also need to look at infrastructure that can accommodate them. But we're making progress here too. I know that it's been a long time coming, but the Western Docks and Freightliner Maritime Terminal at Southampton will soon be ready to allow for longer trains, which is a big boost to operations at the port and hinterlands. And it has been a long time coming, I know that, but we need to celebrate that success. I spoke earlier about the lexical elephant in the room. Well, that's small potatoes compared to the electric elephant in the room. Electrification and, by beneficial extension, decarbonisation are of paramount importance to the freight railway, not to mention the increasingly fragile planet we inhabit. Last year, Network Rail, in conjunction with the wider industry, published its interim traction decarbonisation network strategy document, proposing electrifying over 13,000 single track kilometres together with the use of alternative technologies, where full electrification is unlikely to be viable, and freight is playing a major part in the recommendations made. But we know how important this end-to-end story is for freight and for freight end users. We have not only focused on the big schemes, but we need to provide step change and decarbonisation of rail freight. But we also need to continue to emphasise the critical role the smaller infill schemes such as the Thames Gateway and Felixstowe to Ipswich could bring as well. The immediate stem change is threefold. The modal shift from road to rail, even a diesel loco is better than up to 76 diesel HGVs. The infill electrification I mentioned, doing the schemes that just make sense, but also greater use of existing electric locos. And thirdly, the wider electrification and the transition to more electric hauled freight. To do this, we need to understand the scale of the challenge the industry faces and the pace of the change that's coming from above. And we must continue to showcase rail as the viable green transport alternative that it is. We support decarbonisation in the wider economy through increasing the volumes of good we transport, and the other major topic, which is both the short-term and the longer-term Pandora's box, is reform. I should really have front-loaded the speech with reform, but it is coming, and it's coming quickly. There are some real opportunities for the sector here, and we need to embrace the collaborative work we've seen over the past 12 months and be very open to change. It's a big part of my agenda to work closely with Ed Wilson, who some of you may know, who represents Network Rail on the reform team, and we are going to have bi-weekly updates to make sure that we do have a voice in the reform team as well. And I know Maggie has already said, you know, we need to make sure that happens. So Ed will be coming out to a lot of stakeholders to make sure that your views are taken on board as well. But I think if we work together, to be honest, with each other, there's no telling how much we can achieve. We just need to be open and transparent about it. It's taken a pandemic to get there, to show us what we can do, and so many different fronts when we pull together as one industry. And we'll be missing the biggest trick if we don't continue with this approach in the following year. I hope that it will encourage us to do more and for other sectors to look at us to see how we can help. It's time to end the days where freight is the last bulleted point in a long railway to-do list. I'm here today to say that we are determined to build on that strong collaborative approach that we've demonstrated over the 12 months. We're here to listen and learn from you so that we can work together. We can continue to develop a smarter and more efficient freight offer, and to the benefit of our economy, environment and communities and country. Next slide, please, Maggie. Thank you for listening. That was a rattle through of our plans for 2021, and I would just like to say a massive thank you, and I am open to questions, if that's okay.
Lovely, thank you very much. And before I just take my the slides down and we go to questions, I note your email there, and I'm sure you know people. You've put that on that slide deliberately. I think Charlie said that people can get hold of you if they want to, and
yeah, absolutely.
If you're not frantically scribbling it down now, the slides the recording will be available for you, so you can come back to it there. Right, let me take that down so that we can move into some questions and I can see the question box. So brilliant. Firstly, thank you very much for those. A couple of, what have we got? Let's have a look. Comment, I think, from here from Andrew Hemmings. Please can we add the government onto the list of partners and stakeholders? Andrew's part of the Freight Logistics Working Group and briefing them on Network Rail's plans. So I think just in there. And then comment on that Highways England and the subnational bodies as well, which I think is just code for what a complex landscape we are in. Okay, I'm afraid we're going to get into some specifics here, so forgive me, but let's just dive in. We've got those comments there. High speed light logistics, is this the next big thing that rail freight's waking up to, and what are the operational implications for Network Rail?
Yeah, I would say it's certainly on the agenda. It's something that maybe I've got Richard Moody on to help me out. Richard, is there anything you want to update on, because you're far more up to speed on this than I am?
Yeah, let me just find Richard and allow to talk. There we go, Richard. You are live, in theory.
I think Richard's still on mute. Yeah, you're off now.
Can you hear me? Excellent. So I suppose the light logistics sector. I think what's really good is under Charlie, the freight team and also her stations team, which are probably the two of the key areas to understanding the possibilities for this market. And there's several organisations looking to try things. I think it is potentially a next big thing, not in terms of volume of tonnage we're moving on rail, but in terms of transport decarbonisation. And I think it's definitely something we need to exploit. And I think the good news is within Charlie's team, there's a person now, not sure if it's full time, but dedicating a good proportion of time, full time now, dedicating their dedicated to looking into this side of things. So between the person looking at that and my team, with sort of the overall freight strategy, it's something we're very keen to support and explore on. And through a lot of the work we've done in our team so far, we're also sort of spreading this opportunity through Network Rail to regional colleagues, and even they're starting to pay attention. So good possibility it could be the next big thing. I think there's a lot of hurdles to overcome, but station operations is a key thing, and they're a lot quieter at the moment. So maybe it's a good opportunity to explore when passenger numbers come back, how can the two things integrate seamlessly?
I think it's also worth saying at the moment that we're exploring all opportunities. We don't know when the passengers are going to come back. We're hopeful by September there will be a a vast number travelling by then, but who knows? So we have to look at all sorts of opportunities in business development now. As Richard says, Express Freight is certainly on the agenda, and the fact that we have kind of merged the managed stations team into what was the Freight National Passenger Operations team really helps us out. The managed stations team used to be part of the property team, so they did, I suppose, dabble in this in the past, but didn't really take it much further. But I think we've got a massive opportunity here, and there will potentially be pilots coming up in the next few months that we can start to kind of evidence base and see how we can work through. The teams are working on all the logistics behind the scenes, as Richard said, and you know, it's what's the art of the possible. That's what we're looking at the minute. How can we do it? Logistically, we've got an opportunity, but we need to make sure that when we do it properly and we offer the best service that we can. But is it the next best thing? I think it's something certainly that Network Rail want to see as something that we take the opportunity to explore further.
I think that's, you know, that's really welcome, and I think it's the right approach as well. And you know, we all hope that the passenger demand picks back up at a pace as well, not least because you know, the railway exists for all its customers and users and is funded accordingly. And with a big turn down in the passenger market, there are challenges. But I think within that high speed logistics, there's whole train load, there's smaller train, there's sort of Orion 319 conversion. But there's also goods on passenger trains, and I think that that's another opportunity if trains aren't full in some niche markets to really push on that. So I think that that's really welcome news, and I know a recent workshop's huge interest still from the parcel carriers and others in what rail can offer to them.
I think also as well, it's become very high on the agenda within Network Rail because we have Andrew's kind of senior leadership group, and it just shows you how high it's gone on the agenda because it was a workshop in itself internally. So all the people that are mainly focused on passenger services were asked to contribute on freight and what they thought we could do differently, how we could support our freight customer community. And a lot of them came up with Express Freight as an option. So lots of different people thinking about it, lots of views. And I think, just as you say, Maggie, we're all hoping the passengers will come back. But I don't think that passenger services will be the way they were in the past. Certainly going forward, I know that lots of people like working from home, or the commute might not be there for them anymore. They might not be working in the city the way they were. So we've got to take the opportunity to kind of really maximise the railway the way we can. And freight's the way forward.
Absolutely. Lovely. Right, some more questions coming in. This probably an unfair question, but let me ask it anyway. East West Rail Company, we've all seen the announcements this weekend, but East West Railway Company planning new track from Bedford to Cambridge. It's not clear if this will be freight capable. How is this viewed by Network Rail?
I'm not actually up to speed with the East West Rail. I did read about it over the weekend. Richard, I'm not sure if you can help me out on this one.
Yes, so as part of my role, I've been interfacing with the East West Rail Company and sort of pushing how the opportunities freight there could be for freight if East West Rail had the capability to take freight trains, as well as the capacity issue. It's something I've been plugging away with for several months now, and I think eyes are starting to open. I think for the bit for Bedford to Cambridge, the challenge on capability is because the alignment, the three alignments, there's three alignments on the table. Which one they're going for is not yet known. Depending on what alignment they have will depend on the capability. So it's not a case it's in or out yet. They're still exploring all the options, is my understanding. But I think from a Network Rail perspective, we've done quite a lot to sort of push the freight agenda. We did a piece of work last year. It's on the Network Rail website, the routings of freight growth forecasts. And there's a snippet in there around what East West Rail could offer as an opportunity if it was freight capable. And that sort of like that forecast potential for the future which has started to open eyes within the East West Rail company. So Network Rail have been pushing the agenda. East West Rail's good opportunity for freight, and hopefully that gets taken on board and can be moved forward. But we're doing about as much as we can in trying to promote the story.
Brilliant, thank you. I was doing some maths on East West last week, because I spoke on an East West conference, and the Oxford to Cambridge Arc reckons they're going to build 1 million new homes, which is 200 million tonnes of aggregate equivalent, which when you work that out, 200 million lorry journeys, or 20 million lorry journeys, perhaps I should say, but a lot of lorry journeys. And you think, you know, the potential there for rail freight to help in that house building, but also in, you know, delivering to 1 million new homes, you know, whether that's through high-speed logistics or use of the stations for parcel hubs or whatever. There's a real opportunity there. But keep your questions coming in, people. We've got still some time to go. A comment coming in, agree with you, local authorities have a role to play. This is absolutely. Longer, heavier, more freight trains on some routes needs to evaluate the impact outside the railway on things like level crossings. I mean, I think we're aware of that from some of the work, but a timely reminder. Any comments on that? Either of you?
I think from the level crossings things, I agree with. The ORR's got a consultation out at the moment on level crossings. I've yet to been through it, but I believe the aim is to understanding the trade-offs between what is required to keep a level of safety and the benefit of additional traffic, and doing things as reasonably as practicable. So I think there's some good space, good work heading in that space, rather than a default lots of money required for slight tiny increments.
Okay, straightforward one. Will there be organisational changes in the Network Rail freight account management team?
At the moment, we're a complete transfer across. So I don't know if you want to give me, I'll give an overview, Maggie, for those who might not know what's going on within Network Rail. So over the last few months, we've been evaluating the current structure, and within Network Rail, freight, national passenger operations and managed stations and customer information sat within network services under Nick King's remit. And it's been a decision that's been taken by Andrew and the board that we need to kind of look at the kind of structure going forward. So it was felt, as I said earlier, that we're moving into what was the system operator field. Now, this is good news for us, because Paul McMahon is obviously leading the charge with system operator, and a lot of you probably know him from old. He's been working very closely with the DFT, he's been working with different external bodies, and is also very heavily involved with the reform in the ALB that goes forward for the future of whatever Network Rail looks like. So we see it as a really positive move. We are, and I hate using this phrase, but we're a bit of a lift and shift. So our team actually were put together late November because we'd made some changes in network services anyway. So if I'm being completely honest, our team are quite happy about it. We're very positive. We see lots of synergies. Richard mentioned earlier about the managed stations team. Managed stations team have always felt a little bit like freight, like they were the forgotten people of Network Rail. And actually, they've really had a big voice over the summer, especially when we had, you know, the kind of implications of COVID and working together with industry and working with RDG. So they've seen the benefits of working in a very collaborative way with the National Passenger Operations team and also freight. And they can see that a lot of the kind of things that we discussed about express freight is the future. So we see it as a real positive. We're working in synergies with the likes of Helen McAllister, Richard, other people who will make it far easier when we're all working under one team. Will there be changes? You know, who knows? But I think if there's any changes, it might be for the better. So we will not have anything done to our team. If we are going to make any changes, it will be a positive change. We're looking at the structures. We don't want duplicity. We don't want to create an empire of people. We want to have a very clear, concise structure within Network Rail that our customers know that we are there to service their needs. We actually want to work with you to see how we can work better. So if there are any ways of working in a team that you think would benefit you, then please feel free to suggest them. I'm not saying it's off the table, but I think it's an opportunity for us to look at the overarching team and see where we can actually maybe pull some resource together to help, because I know that certain areas have been slightly restricted around, you know, bringing extra people into the team because of headcount challenges, etc., that everybody in the industry has been facing. So the answer is maybe, and I'll kind of stick with that. I don't want to kind of sound as if I'm sitting in the fence, but I would genuinely appreciate some feedback. If you think there are ways we can work better with you, then this is the time to voice them. And yeah, certainly for us, as I say, it's a positive move. We're going to work smarter, and I think that's the way forward for us.
I think it's a really positive move. I think, you know, it's been widely welcomed by a lot of people. Can you expand a bit on the sort of the relationship then between system operator and the routes and the regions, who are, you know, in senses becoming ever more powerful, and, you know, through that devolution agenda? What's that relationship like?
I think I use this a lot, Maggie, when I speak about routes and regions. Devolved is brilliant for Network Rail. It's absolutely right that we have a devolved network. But that doesn't mean anarchy for us. You know, we have to have some way that we can work together in a consistent manner. And we found this with freight, with national passenger operators, with managed stations, that although you have got 5 very different routes, regions and different routes within that, there needs to be some sort of framework in the back that's a bit of a guiding light. So we're kind of looking at it to support you. And actually something that we've been looking at doing and introducing is bringing in some sort of kind of, I hate to use the word steering group, but it's a kind of workshop or steering group that's on a monthly basis, where we have a virtual community. And that's basically where we interact with our single points of contact within the regions. And we might even devolve that down into the routes and bring them in together with our freight customers and freight community to say, actually, you know, this is how we work together at Network Rail. We understand there's challenges and not everything's going to be the same. There might be a consistent approach that we would want to take if you're a national, you know, operator and you go through 5 different regions. What you don't want to see is 5 different versions of the same thing. So we need to be working far closer together. So I think that synergy with system operator is really good. Certainly from my point of view, since I started, it's been very high on my radar to kind of meet up with the regional managing directors at least once a month. We are in close contact with the route directors, and again, we know that it's not a consistent approach throughout the network. There's a lot of people who have freight far higher on their agenda than maybe others, but we need to make sure that everybody has a voice at that table. So we want to share good practice. We want to understand the challenges that each of the routes have. We want to work closely with our customers so that they have a consistent approach from Network Rail, and also that their voice is heard from a national level, so that we can go out to our routes and regions and say, you know, we need your support on this, or, you know, this is working really well in Northwest and Central. Could we maybe look at doing the same in Anglia? And again, I think it's a really positive move for us.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, I'm always sort of minded, people tell me it'll be fine because so-and-so is really good and they really like freight. And I always go, yeah, but they might leave and you might appoint an idiot. So what are the structures that you know, that sort of, that transcend the really good work of people? And so sort of the more we can have that through whether workshops or forums or codes of practice or whatever it takes to make that something that survives, you know, multiple reorganisations or changes of personnel, whether that's in the customers or within Network Rail, I think is really valuable. So really look forward to seeing that.
It keeps
develop.
continuity as well, Maggie. I think you're right, because within the routes and regions, we've got the reform team. There's a whole industry strategic plan that we've got freight very high on the agenda, and I know Richard's involved in that. But we want to make sure that, as you know, I always say, it doesn't matter if you're in Edinburgh, London, Victoria, you know, London Bridge. There should be some sort of level of consistency within Network Rail, within our own company. You know, obviously, absolutely, you know, as a baseline have that, but from a local level, we encourage relationships. We want to make sure that we don't want to devolve the relationship completely from the kind of central group function, but we want to encourage the relationship so that we can understand the local needs, you know, and that's a big part of working very, very closely together. And I think it's for us in the new world with a system operator to really show where we add value to Network Rail. And again, any kind of customer comments that we have, we will take on board and kind of try and work very well with the routes and regions to identify any gaps that are there. And I think having this virtual community set up where we invite our customers and end users in to actually that group to work with us, we might actually extend that out to some of the RDG board. We haven't looked at the kind of logistics of it yet, but I certainly know, having done it in different other parts of Network Rail, it seems to be working quite successfully now. So I think it's about time we introduce something like that within Network Rail for freight as well.
Sounds good. Sounds really positive. Okay, the questions are piling in, Charlie. So let me go back to those and pick on some. How can we work together to ensure that freight is better valued, both technically, financially, but also in the narrative in big project decision making?
I think that, I mean, it's having that voice. It goes back to exactly what we've said before. I think people take for granted a lot of the stuff that we talked about, getting essential goods from A to B, just goods in general. I love the RDG video where it showed all these different, clips of what we've actually moved from freight. And I think people have now understood the importance of where the freight community fits into the kind of longer term plan for rail. So for me, it's working really closely with all of our stakeholders. And I know that some of the stakeholders have said, make sure that we're included. We need to identify everywhere that we have stakeholders and everybody's got a voice in what they want to say, working really closely with reform, working closely with our routes and regions to make sure, again, that we talked about, we have a kind of unified approach, working with the DFT, accepting there will be challenges, but actually looking for experiences and new opportunities. And going forward, for me, I've spoken to Andrew Haynes about this. We see business development within freight as the way forward. That is certainly something that we need to address. So we're looking at every opportunity that we can. We're working closely with Richard and Ed, obviously from a reform point of view, and making sure that we've got a voice longer term. As I say, I think that's the way forward. Richard, is there anything else you want to kind of add to that?
I think a useful bit. So I'm not sure if people will be aware of this or not. So there's a piece of work Rail Delivery Group are currently undertaking called The Value of Freight, which Network Rail has been part of as of all freight operating companies. And the piece of work, I believe it should be published within the next month or two, will sort of label the value of freight, both in terms of the strategic importance, but also the economic side, and not just from a DFT Treasury perspective green book, which is what's the benefit to government. It's the benefit to the users and wider society. And one of the things I want to use that piece of work for, it will help. We have a piece of work called the Freight Strategy, which will help inform the freight element of the whole industry strategic plan, is use some of that work within that piece of work, but also be able to, when undertaking appraisals for freight schemes, yes, have a government compliant economic business case, but also next to it be able to, hopefully there'll be a framework we can use which can show here are wider benefits, not to the government, but to wider society and organisations. So that to me is to really start showing what is the return on investment, both from a government perspective, but the wider benefits rail freight brings. So hopefully there are some ways we can sort of get that message moving forward.
I think we've also got to explore every commercial opportunity that we can. This is the time for freight. It's a good time. Sorry for cutting across you, Maggie.
No, I was just we're all going to welcome, I think, the RDG work when it comes out, and I think that business development angle, Charlie, that you come back to is really essential, because I'm persistently frustrated when we develop a scheme based around the passenger railway, but then we have to have a business case to see whether freight's allowed on it at all. And there's a number of questions about east-west, which I know isn't really in your space, so I'm just going to park them, and I'll take a screen grab of them for the individual people later. But I think, that's a classic example. They're calling it the east-west main line, but it is not necessarily freight capable. And you just imagine what would happen if that was a motorway that they were building that wouldn't take an HGV. You'd think it's crazy. And it's the same with, the remit for electrification, which the standard remit doesn't have freight in it. And, there are so many places where we just need to turn that narrative on its head a bit, I think, in terms of how we specify those projects. I'm afraid I've got some questions around projects. Just bear with me whilst I find them. What do we think the progress might be on Felixstowe to Nuneaton in the Midlands and the doubling of Somi Ely? The comment is it's critical to increasing capacity, but it's gone nowhere in the last 5 years.
Right, well, I'm going to revert back to my esteemed colleague Richard for this one, because it is a massive learning curve for me at the moment.
Yeah.
So you'll have to forgive me. I am trying to get up to speed with freight as much as I possibly can. So any help that I can get for Richard on this one would be greatly appreciated.
I thought that when I was throwing the question your way, but I think
that's fine. So in terms of Felixstowe to Midlands and North as a whole programme, so I've actually got some funding and a team developing a programme case for that corridor to show that the sum of all the parts is greater than all of their individual things. So to having an overarching case for all the various schemes along that corridor they can all point to. So that's the first thing to try and help move that forward. In terms of the specifics about Soham and doubling the line there, agree it's an important scheme as part of the programme for unlocking capacity on that corridor. So a decision to initiate has been submitted to move the scheme into the rail network enhancements pipeline. At the moment, though, progression on that is deferred through the governance stages due to the comprehensive spending review. So we're waiting to see the outcomes of that before knowing is it going to be progressing further or not. So we're trying to do stuff in that space, but the decisions on making funds available to progress things is tied up with the spending review at the moment and decisions Treasury are making. Even once what's known to be coming out of the spending review, I imagine there'll be some backlog Treasury need to work through. So understand the frustrations, but it's not passing the bucket. It's sort of not sat on Network Rail trying to move it forward at this moment in time.
All roads lead to Treasury at the moment, don't they?
Unfortunately.
So a sort of related, well, different, but also a network upgraded kind of question. What's Network Rail doing to improve the existing infrastructure in key freight areas, following on from the disruptions caused by the weather last week? Are key areas being targeted to improve the infrastructure to minimise the impact on freight? I mean, I think this is a really, critical question when we've seen, increasing amounts of weather-related disruption across the network. I don't know if there's any sort of general points or freight-specific points in that space. Either of you?
I'll bring Richard back into this, but I think just from my point of view, there's certainly been lots of chat within the freight team of what we need to do better. We've certainly looked at workshops that we, how do we make sure that exactly the points that you've made have been brought up and what are the challenges that we face to sort that out. It kind of goes back to this whole Network Rail story that we're trying to promote at the moment within, that we become instinctive industry leaders. This is the way forward. We need to look at how other people do it better than we do. And certainly we can learn from a lot of different countries out there that have to deal with this on a much more regular basis. It always surprises me that every year we get the shock of our lives when we get snow. And it's something that you kind of, I think, within transport, we should be used to this. We should be able to deal with it and we should have a plan in place. So that's certainly where, something that I need to pick up with the team and actually get some sort of traction on that plan to see how we can make things better. Richard, anything from you on that?
I think in terms of resilience to the weather, I think there's a good bit for where the freight team's heading into system operator, also coming into system operator from within the current network services is some of the team who look at some of the operational resilience of the railway, and it also has the task force which has been set up to look at the sort of issues we've had around landslips over recent times. So I think having it all together is a good place. I think within Network Rail there's more emphasis on resilience of the railway as a system is being looked into. I'm not close enough to all the details, so that's about as much as I can say, but there definitely seems to be a stronger focus on resilience and keeping things moving when things aren't going to plan.
I think we're also working very closely with the Met Office as well to understand the challenges. We can pass this on to customers Some of you may know Oliver Bratton, who is also transferring across from network services within Network Rail to system operator, and he's certainly working very, very close on that whole weather resilience plan. So I know he's got a project that he's working through the details and the logistics of at the moment. So again, anything that we can get from an update on that, we will certainly pass on.
Lovely. And sort of related, I've got a couple of questions in around freight capability, around, you know, the ability to run heavy trains over potentially weak structures. And I know there's work underway to try and improve the management of that process, but you know, obviously removing some of those restrictions helps to not only increase the weight of trains, but sometimes the running speed of those. And I wondered if there's any reflections on that programme and the potential for that to make life better in freight. Richard, have you got anything to update on that one?
Yeah, no, I think there's two elements to my answer. The first element, there is a team starting to look into sort of the availability capability in terms of what restrictions and derogations are in place to allow that traffic to run. So there is people looking at as sort of core part of their job to look into. The second part is piece of work we're doing at the moment, freight strategy. We talk about capability. We've for a long time now had a sort of aspiration for a high gauge network, and now it's sort of looking to sort of include a high route availability network to take the heavier trains and sort of define what that network would look like, and then what are the various things to either gain or maintain that capability. So whether it's enhanced maintenance or whether it's new structures, that'll be the sort of a journey that piece of work can take on, kind of like the high gauge journey started 10 or so years ago.
Good, thank you. Sorry. So I think you're right, Richard, it's a really important programme, and we're glad to see it coming forward, and one not to lose sight of, I think. Okay, look, I'm going to take us somewhere completely different here. I can see how the recent reorganisation will assist operators, but the main interaction that end users often have with Network Rail is via the property team, where Network Rail are the freeholder. I'm afraid it's a pointed question because I think we know what the asker thinks the answer should be, but do you think Network Rail's business development aims for freight would be better served by bringing the freight property function back out of the regions to sit alongside the rest of the freight team?
Actually, I wondered if I know this person that's asked me this question, because I've heard it a few times last week. The one positive out of this at the moment is that the managed stations team that I inherited when I started in March last year actually came from the property team. So the relationship with the team that I have part of now is that they're very, very close to the property team that was. So that has been a positive for us, because within Network Rail, there's 44,000 plus people. I get it's like a layer of an onion, you know, you keep peeling back and there's more people with the same job titles, but actually you need to find the accountable person. So at least we have an inroad to the property team that we potentially didn't have before. Is it working? I don't know. And I suppose that's for us to develop that relationship with the regional property team. I see as part of the virtual community that I'd like to set up within Freight that they would be involved in that. So certainly, if it's not all of the regions represented, we would have some of them coming on to this virtual community to make sure that the messages are going back. We need to work far closer together. We need to build relationships with them. We need to understand where their agenda is, but they also need to understand what our priorities and what our customer needs are as well. So it brings it back to the point that I said at the start. Within Network Rail, Freight, it was actually, I think I said to you, Maggie, putting it on the Customer and Communities Committee was a bit of a shock to a lot of people. They're saying, well, why are you putting Freight on that? Well, it wasn't me, it was Andrew. And actually, it took him 10 months to do it. But it's the right thing to do, because customer covers all customers and Freight can't be forgotten in that. And on that Customer and Communities Committee, we've got every region represented by the regional managing directors. We've got all of the other ELT, which is the exec leadership team sponsors. We've got representation from route services, from network services, from system operator, and we've got other members of the board. They need to hear you know, that freight is high on our priority list, and these are the things that we want to see change. I think it's enough now that we've talked about it. We actually need to see some actions. So I get absolutely where this question is coming from. And I wish I had the kind of crystal ball to say, you know what, we'll change it up and it'll all work perfectly well. It's going to be a bumpy ride. We need to navigate, you know, what's coming over the next 12 months. But I think making sure that we have all of the relevant people around the table where we have interaction and getting a clear agenda of what we want for freight is going to help them understand and add that kind of value piece back into what they're doing as well. I've also really encouraged my team now to make sure that they are at team meetings, including the property team meeting, to make sure that we have a slot on their agenda too. And also it's up to us to have that voice and go out there and actually bang the drum for freight, because I don't think it's been done enough recently.
I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, I see the sort of the property holding as a huge asset, you know, because many of those terminals are absolutely critical to the movement, particularly of construction aggregate. But there are also many of them that aren't being exploited as fully as they could be. And when we look to decarbonisation, many of them are going to need to change the way they operate potentially, or modernise or restructure. And you know, where Network Rail have been able to broker change, it's been wonderfully powerful. So I think it's a huge opportunity actually to better exploit that land estate, and doing that in conjunction with the end users, and not seeing them as rental piggy banks, where there isn't the payback in that relationship. It is going to be critical. So thank you for picking that up. Okay, a couple here about growth. Given the challenges of Brexit, particularly at Dover, how can Network Rail support any subsequent change to flows, including hopefully more trains through the Channel Tunnel and more services from other ports? And then linked to that a question, what's the position on free ports, which may not be quite directly relevant, but really comes back to the same point about links to ports and supporting trade.
Richard, do you want to answer that one?
No, that's fine. So in terms of in terms of a Channel Tunnel, as a first part, I think Network Rail actively encouraging the use and the importance it can play, and especially in a post-Brexit world. Obviously, as a multiple players need to come together to make it all work, which is one of the key parts. In terms of, in a post-Brexit world, there's sort of protected international freight paths, which we have sort of from Dollonsmore to Wembley, which exists within the timetable. Even in a post-Brexit world, there's changes being made to the network code to make sure they remain as part of the Treaty of Canterbury stuff. So I think Network Rail recognises that important. How do we encourage it? I think there's lots of things which can go on in that space, and we just need to sort of keep on pushing the support buttons when asked to, or sort of when we see an opportunity. In terms of free ports, I think they offer a good opportunity. How that plays out with rail, I'm not quite as clear on, but I think ultimately in a post-Brexit world, it definitely should aid some opportunities. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, for me, you know, free ports are a government policy around trade, but there are, you know, generic opportunities that arise if ports are able to attract more business. That's, you know, more movements in and out, and therefore a good opportunity for rail where we've got that capacity. But specifically as well, if we can zone terminals into free port zones through clever use of the customs easements that we've already got on Channel Tunnel, and it gives some really interesting potentials. And we know of a number of inland terminals who are working hard to try and get that clearance through. And therefore you can do that sort of bonded warehousing and brokerage on site away from the port itself, but as part of that zone. And people understanding the corridor for the movement of goods in that space. That's also, you know, a real potential gain for us. And it's been interesting. Somebody told me the other day that if you want Grant Shapps' attention at the moment, you have to say the word Kent, because that's where his focus is. trying to make sure that the hauliers get out the country with all the right paperwork in all the right place. And actually rail's been running, touch wood, pretty smoothly, bar one or two teething troubles around just bits of customs paperwork. And there's a long way to go, but so far so good, I think, in terms of that narrative. So it's going to be really interesting seeing how much that brings people to rail, whether that's on the Dover Straits on a train or through a different port, or in that shift from accompanied to lift on, lift off, which we're already beginning to see a little bit of.
I think also from me, Maggie, I'd like to encourage any of our, you know, customers within ports to make contact, you know, so that I can at least meet up, catch up, and try and work out, you know, from them what their agenda is as well, and how we can work better with them. Brilliant.
I think we've got Tim Morris listening in today. He certainly was earlier, who runs the UK Major Ports Group, and if the ports, you know, Tim's very knowledgeable about free ports policy and that, so I'll pick up that introduction as well.
That would be great, because I'd love to learn more about that. It seems to be on everybody's radar at the moment at free ports, so the more information we can get, the better.
Absolutely. And who doesn't love a port? Right, I've got one final question, and then I think, you know, we'll be up against time, and I know we've all got busy diaries. So my final one then, on diversity and inclusion and attracting talent, can you say something about how Network Rail is making freight logistics an attractive career for all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, within Network Rail, we've been working hard against targets, and we haven't met it. I think everybody knows that. From a diversity and inclusion point of view, the whole company are kind of gearing towards, you know, workshops. How can we attract talent? How can, you know, what do we need to do from a recruitment point of view, you know, to make sure that people see it as an attractive job that they want to come in to do. You know, from my point of view, if you look at our actual freight, national passenger and customer experience, we are actually really high on that radar. So we've got a really good split. Or from a diversity and inclusion point of view, we're probably hitting more of the targets than any other part of Network Rail. Certainly from my point of view, there's a lots of different activities going on, and I'd like to take the opportunity at some point in the future to come back and maybe give a full kind of presentation on that. But you know, Heather Waugh is an inspiration to me. She's one of the only Freightliner's only female drivers. She has been on a variety of different webinars that I've been on, and actually listening to her, if anybody out there could not be inspired to actually want and come and do that job, I would be absolutely surprised. But we need to do more. We take that on board. Certainly from my point of view, I think there seems to be a lot more Scottish people in the team. So that's something that's happened by chance more than anything else. But let me take that one away, and let's maybe work on a coming back at some point in the future and giving a kind of fuller update. But it's on our radar, it's on the agenda, and certainly Network Rail are kind of aiming to hit targets over the next 12 months, and we're getting there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think, you know, I think we hit above our weight in freight, but as you say, there's some way to go. So, but it's great to have you online today, really, and to have a woman at the top of freight at the moment is brilliant for us all. Charlie, it brings us to 12:58, so I think you know, or just to wrap up, a huge thank you to you, and indeed to Richard, for jumping on and taking the questions, for taking a whole host of questions around a broad variety of topics, I think I'd say. So apologies for that, but thank you. We will close in a couple of moments. Thank you all to all our attendees for being online today. If you did miss any of it, look out for the recording link later. And if I can just shamelessly steal a couple of seconds just to advertise a couple of upcoming Rail Freight Group events. We have our quiz on the 9th of February. This is our online version of getting drunk in a wine bar near the office, which I'm very sorry we won't be able to do. But we have got a quiz. It's only an hour, it's family friendly, and there are prizes. And as though we've been assured, we can have one round of questions about trains. The other rounds will not be about trains. They'll be on a variety of general knowledge topics, so it won't even be terribly tedious. So do get that one in your diary. That's 7 o'clock on the 9th of February. And our next webinar that's booked at the moment is on the 24th of February. That is with 3 different speakers talking about aspects of rail freight in the Northwest, which includes a speaker from Suez, who move domestic waste in the Northwest, and Transport for Greater Manchester, who are going to be talking about their rail freight study in Greater Manchester and Rail Future, talking about some of their proposals for freight routing in the region. So that one's booking now on our website, and you'll be seeing us promoting that. And we've got another few other webinars in hand, which we'll be dropping the dates of out very soon as we get them booked in. So just ones to look out for there. But thank you to all of you for joining today. And as somebody said in the chat, virtual applause, Charlie, for answering all those questions so valiantly today. And Richard, thank you again for stepping in on the questions. Thank you all, and hope you all have a useful and productive afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much.